And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Corinne Pohlmann. She's of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, talking about these processing fees for credit cards. Again, just I'm kind of fixated on this. I just, trying to make sure I understand the economics of it. So is Canada an outlier versus other countries when it comes to these credit card fees? Are they higher or lower in other countries?
So, generally speaking, we are among the highest in the world. However, the Americans pay even more.
Oh,
So,
okay.
merchants in the United States do pay more than they do in Canada on average, because we've had a little bit of government intervention in terms of trying to push the industry to lower those rates. But there are jurisdictions such as Australia and the European Union where there's been legislation implemented to actually force credit card companies to not charge more than a certain amount on merchant fees. And they're much lower rates as a result in those countries. That is something we've certainly looked at in Canada to see if that's something. But what we've discovered in places like Australia is when those regulations come into place, the banks are going to find other ways to
Right.
recoup those losses. So we see massive increases in bank account fees or something along those lines. So we want to try to do in Canada in a way that it doesn't overall increase costs for small business.
Indeed, indeed. So I've got an open-ended question for you now. Do you think that banks have too much power over small businesses in this country?
Well, I mean, I think Canada's always suffered a little bit from not having a huge amount of competition in the banking sector. We are basically dominated by five big banks in the country, and that does limit the ability of businesses to really shop between banks. Again, in comparison to the United States, there's a lot more ability to compete and get a better offers when it comes to things like loans and bank accounts. I think in Canada, it's a bit more difficult in that regard. So they certainly have quite a bit of a stronghold, I would say, in Canada, and it is a bit challenging for other entrants into that space. But we certainly are excited about things like open banking coming in the future that hopefully can start broadening out some of the competition that can exist in Canada.
Is that what you're advocating for at CFIB to have more options available for small businesses?
Always. I mean, we are a free market focused organization, and the greater the competition, the more options that there are, the better off I think small businesses and Canadians are overall. So hopefully, we'll see some interesting startups coming in the next couple of years as we see open banking coming to Canada.
Open banking, just to describe that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, it essentially allows third parties to come in and work with clients to sort of provide information where you can better compare what each bank is going to offer you without having to like take your information from one bank and then bring it to another, which can be a really onerous thing to do. This is going to allow folks to actually compare banks more easily because basically the banks will have to provide your information to other establishments, whether it's other banks or other fintechs, and therefore you can shop around a lot more easily. It'll also provide more services to small businesses to help them manage their finances. So I think that there could be some interesting opportunities in the coming years. We'll have to see what happens.
That's interesting. Like, we're seeing the start of that with, Wealth Simple and some of these other investment apps that make it easier for people to do these investments without all of the architecture. So this seems to be, is this being driven by blockchain and some of the other trends online?
I think it's certainly that. It's also governments sort of opening up some of the rules and putting some more rules around how businesses can operate within this sort of new environment. It's already something that's in place in the UK, for example, and so we have some examples to watch to see how it's been working there. But it is a fairly new concept that's starting to, I think, broaden out people's opportunities because of the online environments to potentially find new solutions to help them with their financing when it comes to small business lending, for example.
And has COVID kind of impacted, you mentioned one aspect of it, which is the online transactions. It seems that this is just another manifestation of how COVID has had these unintended impacts, right?
Absolutely. There was a massive transition to digital payments over COVID. Not just the credit cards benefited, Interac e-transfers went like skyrocketing. A lot of businesses were using Interac e-transfers to take payments. When you think about that little corner market or farmers market on the weekends who used to always take cash, many of them converted to things like Interac e-transfer. So yeah, it was a massive transition, and my sense is not much of that is going to go back to the way it was. We're going to continue to see that transition. It may go back a little bit because some people will prefer still using cash, but I think for the most part, we've seen a real shift more towards digital payments, whether it's credit card or e-transfers of any type.
I would tend to agree with you. I think that we've crossed Rubicon there, and the era of just cash is kind of over. So very interesting to watch. We'll be back with our guest after this break. Please stay with us.